How's it going, you guys? So in this video, I'm going to discuss how to actually understand health science and physiology and how you can never be bamboozled by the opinions of so-called health experts and fad diet gurus. How you can never be bamboozled by their nonsense again. So first and foremost, we have to understand that science in general is not about discovering absolute truth, because absolute truth cannot be found. The definition of scientific truth is or scientific fact is actually not knowing without a shadow of a doubt 100% that this opinion is true. It's actually about finding the enough evidence for a statement, for a theory, having a theory and finding enough evidence to back that theory up to try to get like maximum probability that that is true. So, for example, the idea that meat causes heart disease. We're not weighing that based on fact and proof. We're weighing that based on how much evidence do we have to support that, and what is the quality of that evidence. And based on the evidence, we try to figure out what is most likely true. What is the most probable explanation for, the links that we might find between it or what have you. And by the way, I don't believe that red meat causes heart disease, but that's just an example. So it's about probability and the weight of evidence, the quality and the quantity of evidence, okay? So anything you read in a textbook is not always 100% accurate, but it's going to give you a basic understanding and visualization of how things work. And that's what you really want to aim towards, is having the most, the best understanding, the best picture and visualization of the mechanisms of how these things work, okay? Rather than trying to figure out once and for all what the truth is, you're never going to find that. But you're going to get a pretty good idea of what's most likely true. And that's what science is really about. Anybody who says, without a shadow of a doubt, 100%, we definitely know that sugar causes heart disease or something, like, that person is kind of like anti-science in a way, because the definition of science is asking questions to gather data to help understand more about the real world, rather than like trying to find truth and then like proving truth. Like, no, it's asking questions to gather data and evidence so that we can learn more, okay? Saying this is the truth no matter what, like, or absolutely true, like, that's not gathering data to understand and to learn. That's stating an opinion. Okay, anyway, so the first thing you need to do, understand basic physiology. If you've passed the 12th grade, then you have done things way more complicated than reading a basic atlas of human physiology. I like how the body works because, and it could be any atlas of physiology and the way the body works, but I like this one because it has pictures and very easy to understand outlines of all the systems of the body. Getting something like this doesn't require a college level education or anything like that. It explains everything from the way the digestive system works, the way the heart works, and arteries and capillaries, and the way LDL and things like that move through the body, the skeletal system, the muscles, and all of that, in a very easy way to understand. It's probably the most efficient way of learning these things. Now, alternatively, you can actually get real textbooks like this one. Human physiology and anatomy, or you can get the Cliff Notes, which I think this is very helpful, but that's a lot more complicated to understand. It's better to just have a overall overview of how things work in this pictograph type of way. I like this one a lot. And it explains, the basic foundation, based on the consensus understanding of how each parts work. Now, there's still going to be some gray areas. There's going to be some either incomplete information or inaccurate information, even in these textbooks, okay? Because again, it's not about truth, it's about what's most probably true. So things like Ketosis. A lot of these textbooks have the outdated opinion that ketosis is strictly due to starvation or diabetes and it's a negative thing or something like that. In which case, that's why this is just the beginning of understanding all this stuff. It's not the end all. And that's why a lot of medical doctors or dietitians and PhD nutritionists, a lot of them are looked down upon because they read these textbooks, they get the college level understanding, and then that's it. They don't read any further scientific research or comprehensive overviews, and they don't expand their knowledge with experts in fields that are kind of like ignored in these textbooks, like ketogenic diets, for example. In which case, you want to read the leading expert scientists who have over 200 publications, peer-reviewed studies in the scientific literature, where they actually have kind of like an add-on to the basic textbooks that discuss ketogenesis in even more detail. But again, this would be more like expert opinion that you read after you get the textbook understanding. This is only to complement your understanding that you read in the basic textbooks. But even the studies in things like exercise physiology, for example, if you actually read the studies in a lot of these books, these textbooks, you'll find that a lot of the studies on exercise science are done on sedentary individuals who just start an exercise routine for 12 weeks or so, or it's done on athletes, but there's such a short-term study, like 4 to 12 weeks, that it can't actually be interpreted as absolute truth, because in the real world, athletes, first of all, athletes are well-trained, and we know that well-trained athletes tend to respond differently to exercise than people who just start an exercise program. You can make way better gains, and any exercise protocol will work in beginners compared to well-trained athletes. And the other thing is, in the real world, whether you're well-trained or not, an exercise program that works or doesn't work in the first 4 weeks is going to have completely different effects over the course of a year. So a lot of these the studies that are used to support the information, exercise physiology books and stuff like that, they're not entirely accurate. So, because the studies are incomplete. And that's the thing about science, is a lot of the evidence, it's not complete, or it has a lot of flaws in it, but it's the best we have. So, but so that's the thing. So you read the textbooks to get a basic understanding of how it all works, so that when you read expert opinion, whether it's vegan or low carb, then you have a better understanding of what they're saying. Like when they talk about the intestinal wall or the stomach acid, you know exactly what they're talking about, and you know how these things work. So if you hear someone like Dr. Eric Berg, chiropractor, say something like, oh, you need to keep your body alkaline or something, then you already have an understanding of how pH balance works because you read the textbook. And so you're like, well, sorry, but that doesn't make any sense, or maybe you could better understand what he's saying, and like, well, you know what, that makes sense, but it sounds like the way he's explaining it, he doesn't actually understand physiology himself, or a lot of times experts, like Dr. Sebi, for example, he says that he has all these documented cases of curing people of cancer and HIV and things like that. And he claims it's because his diet, his raw vegan diet, or his heirloom foods vegan diet, put them in an alkaline, energetic state. When in reality, that, such a restrictive, calorically restrictive diet that's so low in protein and things like that, it induces a process known as autophagy. And autophagy is basically the recycling of cells, which could easily be the real reason why he had a success with, cancer patients and stuff like that. It's been well documented. But, all of his followers and himself, they don't actually have a basic understanding of autophagy or how cellular respiration works or any of that, or pH balance. And so they get a result, like I cured a disease, and then they have like a really stupid way of explaining it. So all the people who get into all the experts who actually understand physiology, they'll listen to this and be like, nah, this guy's a quack, blah, blah, blah. And then his ideas might be good in practice, but his understanding of how they work are not good because he doesn't have this. He doesn't have the basic textbook knowledge. And so people just like disregard it altogether. But so that's why it's important to actually understand physiology. But just understanding physiology, just having the textbook knowledge is not good enough either, because things like that, like reversing disease using a heavily restricted diet and then understanding its autophagy, that's not I didn't figure that out by reading these books. Okay, this played a part in me understanding, well, shit, it's definitely not the pH balance that's helping that guy. But it's listening to experts' opinions. Okay, so now you'll get more like woo-woo stuff, right? Like, diet gurus who want to sell you supplements and stuff, and they might have really good ideas. But the value in books like these are not to get facts. You read these books to get their opinions, and then you read the references at the end. You read the studies that they reference, okay? And when you read these references that support their opinions, now you see, okay, is it a correlation study? Is it like a population study? Like, South Africa, they have really low rates of cancer, but they also have a very low life expectancy because of infectious diseases that kill them way before they're even at the age that people generally get cancer at. So maybe it's not their plant-based diet that's making them have low rates of cancer. It's the fact that they die at such a young age, they never are able to get cancer, to begin with. So Dr. John McDougall and his reference, to this third world country that doesn't have good medical care, and they die at such a young age, they're eating a plant-based diet because they're so poor. They're not eating a plant-based diet because it's healthy or anything, and they're dying because they're poor, because they don't have medical, and then the infectious diseases kills them off, and, they don't have good medical care, so that they have a high, infant mortality rate. So of course they're going to have less cancer, and of course they're going to eat less red meat, So that's just an example of, okay, I read the China study, and I see that the references in the book, they're flawed. Critical thinking has to take place, or Dr. Campbell, he fed these rats. It's a rat study. Oh shoot, he's referencing a rat study, and they fed the rats a carcinogen, alpha toxin. And they notice if they feed them an isolated dairy protein, a casein protein extracted from milk at extremely high amounts, then it accelerates the growth of cancer that was originally caused by the alpha toxin. So it's like these really like shaky studies. If you read the evidence and you're like, oh, so maybe that opinion's not so good. So you gain a better understanding of how things work and how people's opinions are formulated, and you realize that just because there's a lot of references, just because you reference science doesn't mean it's true or not. But then you might read a book where, for an intervention trial, and you're like, oh, the A to Z weight loss study. They actually compared a low carb diet to the Ornish diet to the Zone diet, and they found this one diet group had way better blood pressure improvements, way better body weight improvements, way better blood sugar improvements, better cholesterol improvements, and they're able to eat as much as they want, versus these other diet groups who didn't really, they had to restrict calories and everything, and it was a low-fat diet and blah, blah, blah. And it was a fucking year-long study. And it was funded by, the government, rather, or it was funded by the, it was private, or it was publicly funded or whatever, rather than like privately, corporately funded. So reading the references at the end of the book, is going to be good. And then having a baseline understanding of how all this shit works. Now you're getting somewhere. But if you don't have the basic understanding of physiology, you don't have the basic understanding of how science needs to be interpreted, confounding factors, the different types of studies, you're going to be wasting way more time because you're just going, oh, like Dr. Berg said this and Dr. Berg said that. But what the hell? Like, Michael Greger said this. And, it's like, what do I believe? Oh, I'm so confused. Like, it's because you're not approaching it the right way. Because you're looking for proof. You're looking for, does this work or does this not work? Rather than using critical thinking and having a baseline understanding of how all these opinions are formulated to begin with. So of course you're going to be confused. Of course you're not going to get anywhere. So, so start with the textbooks and then read studies, read science. And if you listen to expert opinions, see if they have references, or at least like they can point you in the direction of another resource that can give you references. And if somebody is speaking an opinion, even if they don't have references, you can listen to it. And they're like, oh, dopamine receptors downregulate in response to caffeine, blah, blah, blah. Even without a reference, you can think about it, and then you'll remember back to the physiology books you read or the books on neurochemistry or, neuropsychology, and you're like, oh, that doesn't really add up, or that does add up. That makes sense compared to what relative to what I read in the textbooks. So that's what you need to do. And if you don't spend the time and energy understanding these basic things, the basic fundamentals of all this to get a foundational understanding, you're just going to be spinning your wheels, getting nowhere, and so that's understanding the truth and the actual mechanisms. However, it's a lot more simple if you just want, like, if you have a health problem and you want to solve it. So if you have a health problem and you want to solve it, it's easier. All you got to do is let's say I have irritable bowel syndrome, right? Like I just have chronic shit problems. Well, you look for people who have healed those diseases and people and don't spend your time watching like 20-minute videos of somebody's experience. You don't need that. All you need is a simple, well, I had irritable bowel syndrome, or I had this, or I had that, and here's what I did to fix it. Done. Don't listen to their mechanistic bullshit. Like, oh, it's because of this and this. No, just gather as many experiences as you can. And if you see thousands of people who are reversing the same condition that you had on a certain protocol, chances are it works. And that's way better evidence that something works than an expert's opinion on it, or even a randomized controlled trial, which is good, but it's not nearly as good as 1,000 people's experiences, really. That in and of itself is equivalent to an intervention trial. And the only problem with anecdotes is that sometimes it's not verifiably true. But even food questionnaires and cohort studies and population studies aren't verifiably true. And then also the confounding variables. But again, confounding variables happen in intervention trials and they happen in population studies. So anecdotes are not really as bad as people think, or as they say. But having a baseline understanding of how the body works and these things, and then comparing it to these people's experiences, will give you an even better idea of what's actually going on. So with that being said, if you have a health problem, look at the carnivore diet people. Oh shit, they're experiencing all this stuff. And, it works, but why does it work? And then figuring out why it works helps you get even more specific on how to actually solve it, developing your own protocol. Just because people reverse a condition eating nothing but red meat doesn't mean it's the meat that makes it the way it is, or the removing of vegetables. It might just be specific things that they're removing that are solving their problems. And in some cases, people might need an all-meat diet. So now you're like, well, maybe it was the nightshades because of solanine content. Maybe it was the fiber. Maybe it was this or that. Maybe I can include fruits in my diet and honey and still be healthy. Maybe I need to remove all fiber. Maybe I don't. So that's referring back to, this cross-referencing all these different sources, and then expert opinions. Paul Saladino, he has all these studies on fiber and things, and then search for studies done the opposite. So anyway, I hope this has helped. You don't have to be as vigorous as all of this. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. But just understanding that nothing is actually proven, but there's just all these, different ideas that have different forms of evidence behind them, and having a baseline understanding of how the body works, knowing how to interpret the information you do read, that will steer you in the right direction. Leave your question, comments down below. Talk to y'all next time.